So today we're going to discuss advisory committees, and these are required like any other compliance item. There are varying degrees of implementation. Next slide. Legal requirements are in place to ensure the traditionally voiceless have a voice. So try to remember that the legal requirements are the minimum that you are required to do. But we want you to consider and think about your endeavors. Do you strive to do minimum and expect to yield excellence, or just to get by and check the boxes? As educators, it is rare for us to strive for the minimum. And so as you go forward and you do this work, remember why these legal requirements are in place. Your approach to this work will make all the difference in the product you yield. Minimum input will check the boxes. Strategic and purposeful interactions will develop with partnerships and give parents a voice. Next slide. So we're starting with the ELAC. ELAC must be established at all schools when there are 21 or more English learners enrolled in the school. The ELAC is the English Learner Advisory Committee, and it has the responsibilities which include advising the SSC on programs and services for English learners for inclusion in the SPSA, assisting in the development of school-wide needs assessments, and efforts to make parents aware of the importance of attendance. The ELAC must also have the opportunity to elect at least one member to the DLAC. Next slide. Steps for establishing an ELAC. So first, you want to determine the percentage of English learners in the school and determine the preliminary size of your committee. Determining the preliminary size of the advisory committee, then notify all of the parents in the school of the election of parents to serve on the committee. You may want to hold a general information meeting about the committee and the responsibilities. And you would conduct an election, and only the parents of English learners may vote. And then lastly, you're going to convene the first meeting of the ELAC and train the members on their roles and their responsibilities. And the ELAC may delegate its responsibilities to another site level committee. Next slide. So we often get these questions if the SSC can act as the ELAC. Yes, however, there are specific steps that must be taken in order for an ELAC to delegate its responsibilities to another committee such as ELAC. First, an ELAC must be elected and trained and informed of their responsibilities. So everything on the previous slide must occur before you can delegate. Then the ELAC may vote to delegate its responsibilities to the SSC for a period up to 2 years. The SSC would then need to be informed of the ELAC responsibilities and vote whether or not they accept these responsibilities. If the SSC accepts the ELAC responsibilities, the SSC would be responsible for fulfilling the legal requirements of both committees, the SSC and ELAC. And after the specific period of time, not to exceed 2 years, an ELAC must then be elected again, and the procedure starts all over. Next slide, please. Very important aspect of having an ELAC is training. So ELAC members must receive training and materials to assist them in carrying out their required advisory responsibilities. They should also receive information on the Green Act requirement, bylaws, meeting procedures, to ensure that they know how to conduct an effective meeting. And it's also important to think about and consider what might the ELAC members need to know to advise on program and services for English learners and the school plan. So consider what foundational information would help ground them in their responsibilities and in understanding their advisory capacity. And lastly, training must be planned in full consultation with members. So it's important to work with the committee to determine their needs and to plan accordingly. Slide, please. So now the District English Learner Advisory Committee, or DLAC as it's known. This is required when a school district has more than 50 English learners enrolled. The DLAC must be composed of a majority of parents of English learners. And so each school will have a school level eLAC and then the DLAC representative to the DLAC. Like eLAC, DLAC has specific advisory responsibilities, and they advise the local governing board on the tasks here on the screen, which is to inform the training of the DLAC. Some of the topics similar to the responsibilities of the eLAC are to advise on the programs for services for English learners, but at the district level, and they would give input to the EL master plan and to needs assessment. And also, if the DLAC serves as a dual role and serves as the EL PAC for the purposes of the LCAP, the committee must also then carry out those responsibilities, and we'll talk about that a little later. Next slide, please. And again, DLAC members must receive training and materials to assist them in carrying out their required advisory responsibilities. And as with the eLAC, training for DLAC must be planned in full consultation with its committee members, which means that you should get their input and make sure training is planned with that in mind. Next slide. So the LCAP advisory committees. These are two required committees. The Ed Code requires LEAs to present the LCAP as part of the LCAP process to a parent advisory committee, which must include parents of English learners, foster youth, and low-income students. And every LEA will need to convene a parent advisory committee, or a PAC. And for those LEAs that have at least 15% of English learners and at least 50 pupils who are ELs, they must also convene and present the LCAP to an EL Parent Advisory Committee, or EL PAC. There is no requirement to establish a new parent committee for this purpose. And then what we find is many districts will use their DLAC to fulfill this responsibility. So it should be clear within your district that the PAC and the EL PAC are two separate committees. Next slide, please. Okay, so suggestions for best practice. So we often get questions about committee operation, and here are some suggestions for best practice with your committees. One, having bylaws will support smooth operation. Providing the presentation and documents in English and the primary language of the families, as well as having translation and interpretation provided during the meeting. And not just during your eLAC, but during all meetings, having a translation and interpretation services and documents in their primary language makes meetings more inviting for parents and makes them feel more comfortable and able to participate. You want to schedule meetings in consultation with parents. So annually asking parents, when is it most convenient to have meetings? Is that morning or afternoon, or should you vary, do some morning and some afternoon? Also providing childcare for parents to attend meetings is very important. Often they have nowhere to leave their little ones, and if they know their little ones are nearby and safe and happy, then they would attend. And then schedule your DLAC to precede your eLAC, which gives site leaders and your eLAC a foundation for their eLAC meetings. And that often helps as they prepare and making sure that they meet their obligations as well. Next slide, please. We get this question a lot. What if no one wants to participate? We hear that. Well, we did the elections and no one volunteered. What do we do? You want to ask and reflect on these questions. How are invitations sent? What is understood or misunderstood about participation? What are the barriers parents have identified to participating? What is it that they feel would prohibit them? Talk to parents, understand where they're coming from. And then ask yourself, how welcoming is your culture? Who feels welcome? And what makes some feel welcome and not others? And it is really important to get the voices of everyone to understand what it is to walk on your campus and how they feel, to understand what those advisory committees are and why it's important for them to participate in their students' education. So next slide, please. So procedures, bylaws, and documentation. So we're addressing the importance of having these procedures and bylaws in place and maintaining adequate documentation. The success of any council's work is largely dependent on having clear procedures that are understood by all at the beginning of the year. Next slide, please. So first, there are two laws that govern public meetings pertaining to our profession. The Brown Act is an open meeting law for local governments, and its main purpose is to ensure the rights of the public access to how local governments make decisions. The Brown Act provides legal requirements for school board meetings. Now, the Green Act creates additional public meeting requirements for school districts, and the Green Act exempts certain parent committees from the Brown Act, but creates a separate set of rules to ensure open meetings. Next slide. So which applies to us, brown or green? It's the Green Act. And we have provided for you a handout here, and this link will get you to this handout that details the difference between these two, the Green and the Brown Act, for you. So next slide. The procedures of the Green Act apply to school sites and to all advisory committees. The Green Act outlines 6 key requirements for the SSC and all other committees. Here they are. They're 1, all meetings need to be open to the public. Notices must be posted 72 hours in advance. Notices and agendas must be posted at the school site or other appropriate accessible places accessible to the public. The notices and agendas must include the date, the time, location of the meeting, and the items in the agenda. And the action is limited to the posted agenda items. And lastly, the public must be provided access to all materials. Next slide, please. So the agenda is set and notices of the meeting is posted, and now your council's ready to meet and conduct business. To be most effective, councils also need to follow rules of order for working agreements to provide parameters on how business is conducted. Rules of order also support equity on the council by ensuring the voice of all, that they are heard and no group or individual dominates the meeting. Councils often follow Robert's Rules of Order or some variation of those rules. Rules of order should support the work of the council, and therefore they need to be clear and not be overly complicated. The rules should be understood by all and may be referenced in the bylaws. And it would be very important to include your rules of order in your training for any of your councils, so that parents feel comfortable and understand and can ask questions about that, because it's not a familiar way of conducting themselves when you're following the rules of order. Next slide, please. Bylaws. These are the internal rules that govern how your council and committee is run. And although bylaws are not required, they do serve a very important role in keeping your council and committee running smoothly. There are some basic things that should be included in bylaws, such as how vacancies are filled, what officers will your council have, and what role will they play. Additionally, your bylaws can outline duties of officers and council members and include the procedures for how and when they are selected. Are they selected for a 1-year term or a 2-year term? Are certain members selected on alternating years, or do you get a brand new council every year? All of those things can be determined and written into the bylaws. Bylaws can also include when and how quorum is reached. What happens if a member is missing for consecutive meetings? At what point do we replace them? And then who can vote and how long is membership terms, and so on and so forth. So having bylaws can help to eliminate issues before they arise because you have a distinct set of rules that you would follow. Next slide, please. Documentation. What documentation should you be keeping? Because documentation of committees and procedures is part of compliance monitoring, it is important to ensure records are maintained and accurately reflect the committee's actions. For every committee, how they annually evaluate their plans and how they obtain input and how they are meeting all of their requirements is noted in your documentation. Keeping evidence of the process of the elections and the election, and if an election is contested, all of that information is important to keep on file. So keeping your evidence and your copies of prior years, keeping those records to demonstrate each committee has fulfilled their responsibility is critical. Next slide, please. So now agendas and minutes. You will see later that some of the evidence requested for federal program monitoring calls for the meeting minutes and agendas. Therefore, it's important to consider how minutes will be taken, who is taking the minutes, and how they are trained. Some LEAs provide templates for agendas or minutes to assist schools. How schools post or review minutes after each meeting and reviewing them on a regular basis should be part of the district's process. Given the importance of the minutes to program compliance, it may be advisable to have the school secretary or someone with experience taking minutes and they be assigned to that task. The minutes from prior meetings should be reviewed and approved by the council at each meeting to ensure that they accurately reflect meeting content previously discussed. So next slide. So what are we including in these meeting minutes? The meeting minutes should reflect the date, place, and time of the meeting, the persons in attendance and their titles, pertinent action, motions, whether adopted or rejected, the name of the person making the motion, points of order. For elections, the name and the nominees and the results of the election, the name of the secretary or recorder. The minutes should also reflect review of the consultation of the SPSA by the ELAC if that is what has been decided. And remember that minutes should be kept on file for future reference and review of documentation. And if it's your LEA's system to also submit a copy of these to your LEA, so you keep a file, you keep records on file at the school site, but then also submit those to your district. That's a good system for having a backup and being ready for FPM if ever selected. Next slide, please. So now planning for virtual SSE and ELAC meetings. During COVID, many LEAs established procedures for conducting meetings in a virtual format for SSE and ELAC meetings. And the CDE has indicated that there is no prohibition on virtual meetings, especially if they support and encourage participation. Well, we have found that districts have found that having the virtual meeting makes it easier for parents to attend and they've maintained this setting. So, but all requirements for meeting access and other meeting requirements still apply. In planning for virtual meetings, the following should occur. You should email the agenda and virtual meeting link to all families and staff at least 72 hours prior to the meeting. Ensure the email is translated into the required languages. Ensure email provides clear instructions on how to call into the meeting if video is not accessible and how to provide comments. Ensure it is clear in the communication that public comments are strictly related to the agenda items. And then things to consider as well, if you choose this route, is consider translation needs in a virtual setting and ensure quorum by using a roll call or display log if the council members are on a virtual platform. Next slide. When using a virtual meeting platform for a school site council meeting or an ELAC meeting, it's important to maintain documentation of these meetings, as we discussed earlier. In some ways, this documentation can be collected by including a recording or an audio or a video recording of the meeting. For sign-in sheets, you can consider using a visual or verbal roll call. A council member may have the responsibility for taking screenshots or printouts of the participants' gallery and attaching it to the minutes in lieu of a sign-in sheet. Or to document action taken by the council, consider documenting members' votes on action items in the chat and keeping a screenshot of the results to add to the meeting minutes. Additionally, when you may consider collecting electronic signatures and following up with a wet signature when the parent is on campus or for drop-off or pickup. Conducting virtual meetings or utilizing hybrid models is not a requirement. However, if your LEA sees advantages to conducting meetings in this way, we hope these suggestions help to meet the requirements and support your LEA with parent involvement and engagement.